Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents and Conversations Live for our radio audience tuning in at Max WYAD 94.1 FM and WYADonline.com. We're glad that you all can be with us. Also joining us online worldwide via our podcast. We're glad you all could be with us as well. Excited about today's guest. It's one I just told her. Her book is something that hits me close to home, and I think for a lot of you as well. We're now live on Amazon Live for today's program of Cyrus Webb Presents and Conversations Live. We have Dr. Meredith Gansner that's joining us today. Her new book is called Teen Depression Gone Viral. I'm going to talk to her about this important topic, but also what all of us need to know about what we can do to be supportive, not only of teens, but also their families as well. For those of you joining us on the Amazon side, you will notice we have the book in print as well as the Kindle edition there. You guys can be able to one-click it either on the side or down below. For those joining us on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you'll see a link that will bring you guys over to Amazon. For those on X, it's in the comment section. And those on Instagram, it'll be in my stories. But Dr. Gansner, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, the pleasure's definitely all mine. This book, I think, is so timely. I was sharing with you a bit about my own story, which my radio audience knows that I'm someone who dealt with depression, dealt with not only suicidal thoughts, but also suicide attempts. So when this book was first pitched to me, I was very excited about it because books like this, I didn't know anything about them when I was going through my thing. And as the nerd that I was, I would have definitely have read them. But I think, too, the world has changed so much since then. What has it been like for you to see the way that people are responding, Dr. Gansner, to teen depression going viral?
Thank you so much first for just your public disclosure. I think that is so important now. Social media platforms have helped, hopefully, in certain ways, destigmatize mental illness and talking about it. But just having people mention their stories and talk about their experience with what worked in treatment and what didn't work in treatment, it's just incredibly helpful for, I think, just the populace in general to hear those stories, and also for clinicians to hear those stories, because I think for so long we have had a mindset of, okay, this is exactly how we treat this, and it's one path forward, and we don't diverge from that path. But with the internet being what it is now, we're having a lot more patients, I think very correctly and appropriately, explore what psychiatric illness is and connect with others online about their experiences, right? So I think clinicians are now more held accountable for what we recommend in terms of treatments, and that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned treatments. I definitely want to get into that because I think one thing I was, when I went through my bout of depression and suicide, especially my last suicide attempt, I attempted, unfortunately, 3 times. My last time was when I was 20. I did see a therapist. I was not giving any medication at that time, but we're talking in 1999. So it was a totally different world than what we're living in today. Are you finding, though, Dr. Gansner, that people are more not only agreeable to being open to recognizing that there is something out there that can help them, and then, of course, being able to take advantage of those things that are there for them?
Yeah, those really are two different things. I think there is certainly more awareness of the use of medication plus therapy to treat depression, especially in children and adolescents, than previously, which is great. I do think, though, access also not just to the therapy and the medication, right, but also to access about those things, right, and good information, correct information about therapy and medications. That is not guaranteed for so many families. And so while it's definitely better, I think, than it was in terms of just accepting the diagnosis, the treatment part has a little ways to go, because families are going out there trying to understand what treatments work, what don't, but there is a lot of misinformation out there. And I think, most recently, thinking about people high up in the government saying that these medications can be a threat. So there are a lot of parents now concerned about that statement and what that means for their children. So just thinking about kind of that overall, the cultural zeitgeist surrounding these things and on social media platforms, and how that impacts patients' desire to get treatment or understanding of how the treatment works.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and that's one of the reasons why I love to use my platform this way, Dr. Gansner, because I love to have individuals like you who can give our audience information that is, one, reliable and based on the facts and science, rather than just conjecture or opinion. is that one of the biggest, do you find, challenges when it comes to dealing with not only teens and depression, but also their families about some of the things that people kind of allow to keep them from taking advantage of what's available for them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is just uh, trying to let families know that we live in this age of being able to access information at our fingertips at any time. And so I think maybe as a whole, we have more trouble waiting for things and seeing whether things will work, and also being comfortable with uncertainty. And so, one of
Yeah.
the biggest things as a clinician that I try to emphasize for my patients, but also in the book, is to say that sometimes on the internet, and we get this idea that therapy works amazingly. There's no better thing than therapy. And then a child tries it and it's maybe the wrong fit, or perhaps it's the wrong type of therapy, or sometimes teletherapy or remote therapy isn't for everybody, right? And then there's this feeling of, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? And the same thing with medications, where one child might try a medication and it works amazingly, and another child tries the same medication and it doesn't work at all. And so that can be incredibly frustrating for parents who feel as though, to some degree, clinicians may be lying to them about these being the most appropriate treatments for depression, when it just, nothing is as easy as I wish that it was.
Yeah. I think too, there is, even though this is something that it will be different for everyone, Dr. Gansner, for sure. I think what I love that you've done in the book is talk about, and this one thing that I have to say that I did have. My issue when I was dealing with depression had nothing to do about bullying, had nothing to do about issues at home. It was just my own belief that I was not enough and not worthy. And that's something that sometimes is different than what a lot of young people are dealing with, right? But it was serious enough that I did try to, as I mentioned, to take my life. I bring that up because one thing that you do talking about in the book, Teen Depression Gone Viral, is that what we can do to kind of be part of that support system. Talk to us about our role, whether we have young people around us or maybe we have someone in our family that we feel like may be dealing with depression. What can we as a society do?
Well, as a society, I think there's certainly lots of things we could probably do better. Just, my personal opinion there, but our
Yeah.
mental health system, I mean, everybody knows our mental health system is broken beyond. I mean, it is just really, really challenging for families everywhere. And I'm in a state that has a tremendous healthcare system and has a lot of mental health supports. We have tons of psychiatrists, but yet there are still plenty of teens in our area who can't get access to treatment that they need, which is really, that shouldn't be the case in this day and age, for sure.
Right. Right.
But I think in terms of what is most needed is really just a consistent support, right? I mean, medications, therapy, those are all great things, healthy lifestyle, definitely part of the treatment plan. But those are really hard for kids with a depression, especially when they're at the point where they don't feel like life is worth living anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard to get a teen who's at that point to just get out of bed, to exercise, to then maintain a normal sleep schedule, right? They oftentimes will be sleeping during the day and then up at night. They might not be eating anything. They don't want to engage in therapy. They don't even want to leave the house. And so it's so challenging for parents when they get to that point, because they know kind of what they should be doing, but really don't know how to get their kid to get there. And I think that really is where it becomes a village approach, right? We need parents to know that they shouldn't be trying to do this alone. As many supports as their child can have as possible, to try to brainstorm and find ways to help their children become maybe a tiny step closer to getting the depressive episode a little bit better. And even that just means getting out of the house, for half an hour a day, or just getting out of bed for half an hour a day. I think that's a really good place to start in terms of what's most important, is just making sure you have that system in place that can be there to help their child, and also just knowing that, like, they shouldn't be trying to do this alone.
Such a great point. I'm going to reset real quick here and say for our audience that's joining us, both for Amazon, I see you guys already one-clicking the Kindle edition of the book. You're going to enjoy this. It's called Teen Depression Gone Viral. Our guest is the author, Dr. Meredith Gansner. We're talking with her today about the book, but also some of the impact of it. I want to say hello to Sagur869 over there on Instagram. Hello to you, Jesus Blackman 23. Glad you could join us as well. If you guys have any questions for Dr. Gansner, make sure you guys do put those in the chat as well. Let's go back a little bit. I was so excited to jump into this with you. I guess we should talk about how this all came about, Dr. Gansner, how the book first came to you. So what was it that made you say, this is something that I see as an issue, and this is something that I need to bring awareness to?
So this book, even though maybe not as a book, but as an idea, has been percolating for probably about a decade at this point.
Okay.
I became interested over 10 years ago in the topic in general about teens and their interactions with social media and digital media. And I thought, this is something that is going to be, it's going to be important for us to keep looking into this for years to come. And I mean, in that I was very correct, I guess. And a lot of people were knowing that that was going to be an ongoing issue. But as the years have progressed and researchers have tried to understand the impact of social media and digital media on teen mental health specifically, I kept seeing that we really weren't getting to concrete solutions that would help the patients that I was seeing. I was still seeing patients coming in where the parents were at their wits' end. They could not get the device away from their child. They didn't even understand why their child was needing to be on a device 24/7. Cyberbullying to sexting to sextortion now. I mean, there were so many different ways that teens were getting into trouble online, and especially depressed teens. And they really hit home during COVID, where then teens were at home having really nothing else to do but get into trouble online, and parents were struggling to hold down their jobs while taking care of their kids at home. I mean, it was just so hard for families then. And I realized that if there was any way that I could offer constructive information to parents, and also just letting them know that it's okay that this is overwhelming, because these poor parents were thrown into having to navigate social media and cyberbullying and as parents. And I think maybe, with my kids, I might be more ready to teach my kids about how to be safe online. But parents, especially like 10 years ago, right, that was something that they were not aware that was going to be so important in their parenting. And so I wanted this book to be a tremendous support to those families that are feeling just absolutely overwhelmed in a broken mental health system, and knowing how to protect their children, their depressed child, in this time of kind of turbulence and social media turbulence.
Yeah. There were, for myself as a reader, Dr. Gansner, when I was reading Teen Depression Gone Viral, there were kind of 4 components that kind of stood out to me. And again, maybe because of my own connection to the topic, but I thought, for one thing, the recognition of it first. I think in my life, I did well in school, so there were no warning signs from my family that something was wrong, that something was off. I've always been an introvert, so ironically, so that didn't seem weird to them, that I didn't really have people around and that kind of thing. I want to talk about that component, but then I think too, based on what you just were saying and looking at a decade ago, do you find that there are parents that do blame themselves? Because when I finally started, when I was in my 30s, well, no, my late 20s, I think, when I first started talking about it, and my family even knew. My family didn't even know, because my last suicide attempt, I wasn't even living in the state. But when they found out, there was a sense of, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. What could I, And I was like, well, no, it's not really. It wasn't really you.
It wasn't you.
Yeah. Are those things that you're finding, that one, seeing that there may be something going on, but also 2, making sure that you're not blaming yourself for it?
Definitely, but both those things are important to keep in mind, for sure. I think one of the major reasons that parents actually have trouble recognizing that their child might be depressed is because perhaps unconsciously there is part of them that is terrified of what that means, and terrified of what that means for their parenting, right? I mean, no parent wants to think that their child has become depressed. And unfortunately, with psychiatric illness, there is a long history of blaming the parents. I'm not saying that parents cannot play a role, right, in stressors at home or genetics, right? Which, I mean, their genetics is not nobody's fault, for sure. But it's never one issue that causes a major depressive episode. It's not just one single factor. And if parents can try to, I think, tell themselves that if there's just an inkling of them that thinks that their child might have depression, I think that can help them have more of an open mind and saying, okay, maybe there is something going on. Maybe it is depression. It doesn't mean that, I'm failing as a parent. I need to accept the fact that, this isn't a me problem right now. This is that I have to help my child, and I have to do whatever I can to get them help. And I don't think that's, the case certainly with every parent. But with a lot of parents, I have seen that really insistent, like, absolutely not. I mean, my own child sometimes has anxiety, and I find myself sometimes saying, like, no, you must not be anxious, because I was a really anxious kid. I'm like, no anxiety for you. And I'm like, I'm a psychiatrist. Like, that is not, whoa, like, it's okay. And that's really important for parents to be able to do, to recognize that, like, this is not about them right now. It's about helping their child stay safe. And I mean, as you know, more than most, the horrific consequences of depression, to the point where many kids, far too many kids, are still ending their lives. So
and that leads me to the third thing, then, Dr. Gansner, that I picked up on as a reader, and that is the stigma, right? I mean, even if a young person, like for myself, I had these feelings. Like I said, I was doing well in school. I was just me, but I didn't come out and tell people, you know what, I don't feel good about myself, because the idea of that, it almost felt selfish, to try to make things about me. How much are you seeing that stigma even today plays a role in this, that if we do talk about it, if the teen talks about it, if the family talks about it, then that's recognizing that there's something that people will then start looking at them as like they have something.
Oh, sorry. It froze for a second there.
No
So, and I also apologize, my dog just barged in. This is why the door opened behind me. There's an Australian Shepherd that is wanting to get on camera.
Do you need me to repeat, or are you?
No. So thinking about stigma, it's really interesting, because we've actually, at least in my mind, kind of gotten to this point where, yes, the old stigma is still there of, I know depression is a weakness. I can't be depressed. I can't be selfish, as you were saying. Like, I can't make this about me. A lot of kids really don't want to worry their parents, so they're like, nope, I'm fine. I don't want things to be more difficult at home. Or if they have a sibling who's been through this, they don't want to do that to their parents again. That's their mindset. But we're also seeing this really interesting stigma against depression itself as an illness, which is really interesting, because it's not necessarily that there's a psychiatric illness afoot. It's that a lot of teens don't want to have depression specifically, right? They seem to be okay with other psychiatric illnesses, but depression itself is like, nope, I can't have that. Definitely don't have depression. And that I do talk about in the book, the idea that some kids feel like they are more seen by other psychiatric illnesses, sometimes ones that they read about online. I think because, quite honestly, again, as you know, more than most, depression is a terrifying illness to have. And I think it's almost easier for some teens to say, okay, maybe I have autism spectrum disorder, or I have dissociative personality disorder, right? Or something that is, more kind of community based online, that maybe seems a little bit less terrifying than having depression. And so that actually means that there's kind of a different problem that we have to deal with in terms of stigma. But it's one I hadn't seen really into the last 10 years, that kind of stigma against depression specifically.
Got you. And then, you know what, in hearing you say that, it makes sense, because again, the way that so many people again view that, and don't think it's something that's quote unquote real. Right. Which leads me to the fourth thing, which is actually what you write a lot about in the book. And again, I put it as the fourth and final thing for myself, Dr. Gansner, because again, I didn't have it when I was going through it, and that is the internet. I didn't have social media. Again, talking about the times that we still had typing classes when I was in high school, so we didn't have to worry about being bullied online. But the role of social media, and I guess because my experience with social media has been, I would say 80% positive, and again, in being able to have great conversations with individuals and sharing stories, but again, that's what I that's what I look for. So that's what I'm kind of gravitating toward. Your book makes it very clear, though. This is not about trying to keep the kid away from social media. Talk to us, though, about the balance that you believe kind of has to be there. And I know every child's situation will be different. Every teen's situation will be different. But why is it important for the family and even the teen to be balanced when it comes to social?
Yeah. So while every teen's relationship with the internet and social media platforms will be different, the overall process of finding that balance, I actually think is the same, or ideally should be the same amongst all teens and families. And that's really getting to the point where we, as I think, as a society, as long as we have social media platforms and the internet, all start working on understanding our relationship with the internet and social media in the context of everything else in our lives, from anxiety disorders to depressive disorders, and knowing, what are the warning signs in us that may mean that our relationship with the internet and social media is maybe not going to be a healthy one, right? Because as you said, there are countless ways that families and teens can get support and really good information online about psychiatric illness. And especially when teens are using the internet for connection, for ways to kind of validate their symptoms and their feelings and to understand what that means, for just identity formation for teenagers. It's huge, right? But unfortunately, when a teenager is starting to get depressed or maybe in the midst of a depressive episode, the patterns of use start to change a little bit, right? So teens might start to use it more at night, so their sleep starts to go a bit haywire. They might start using more and more, so they're not getting as much exercise. So you're starting to lose some of the things that we know can be helpful in depression recovery and depression treatment. But then on top of that, you're also exposing yourself to potential ills or dangers of the internet, right? That will be more impactful once you're in a depressive episode. I mean, just think about, if you're feeling healthy and you post something online and someone says something horrible about it, or just totally makes fun of it and puts some sort of sick burn on it, and everyone is joining in on that, right? That would feel horrible, but it might not feel life-ending. But for a kid with depression, they might be going online to find others to connect to feel better about themselves. If that happens, there could be an entirely different outcome, like a suicide attempt. And so just us as a society trying to help teach our children what their relationship with the internet should be like and what to think about in that relationship, that's going to be incredibly important over the next 10 to 20 years.
Such a great point. I want to let our audience know at the time we're having this conversation, Dr. Gansner's book is in the top when it comes to new releases in child psychology. At the time we're having our conversation, it's number 11 today. So congratulations to you, Dr. Gansner, for that. I think it really shows the importance of this topic, but also how this is something people are looking for. And I'm so glad that you've been able to fill this void that's been out there in dealing with this topic. What is your hope for our audience out there that's joining us on Amazon, on social, or on the radio dial, Dr. Gansner, about not only, of course, this topic that we're discussing when it comes to teen depression, but also making sure that we have a plan? And that's one of the things that you talked about as well.
Yeah, my hope is really that people, again, going back to, I think, what we talked about before we went live, is giving themselves grace and understanding that this is complex. I think I say this maybe 20,000 times in my book. Spoiler alert, depression is really complex. And our relationship with the internet and social media is also complex. Right. Just the factors that come together to cause a depressive episode, complex. Treatment, complex. It's just, nothing is straightforward. And it's really important that families and kids recognize that this is going to take time in terms of recovery from any psychiatric illness. There is usually no one easy fix, right? If there was, I would be out of a job already, which would be unfortunate for me. But I mean, there isn't that. And I don't think we as clinicians do a good enough job telling families that we don't know sometimes. We just sometimes don't know. But we do know that it's complex, and that families need to understand that it's not their fault if the treatment plan isn't going the way that they want it to. And it's not their child's fault or their fault if their teen isn't getting better. It's just that there's a lot that we still don't understand yet about how to treat psychiatric illness. And we're just getting to, hopefully maybe in the next 50 years we'll get to the point where we really can truly target treatment, but we still have a long ways to go. So people need to cut themselves a break.
Yeah, but this book is a start, Dr. Gansner, and again, I appreciate it, and it made me think about conversations that the younger me could have had, but I think too, letting, as you talk about in the book, and as I mentioned in my own personal experience, letting families know it's not your fault, but it is something that you can be able to live with together and to deal with together. And I think that's the thing, because I think the worst thing a teen or a parent could do is feel alone in this. So congratulations again to you, and thank you so much for the book. Again, everyone, Teen Depression Goes Viral is the book by Dr. Meredith Gansner. It is available here through our friends at Amazon. You can get the print edition or the Kindle edition right now. Again, already an Amazon bestseller. Dr. Gansner, let our audience know, how can they stay connected with you?
So I have a website, Dr. Meredith Gansner, MD. It does have information about my book, but it also has information about the research that I do on high-risk social media use and digital media use in teens. So you can learn a little bit more about what we do and don't know regarding this topic, because it's certainly one that we need to keep learning about for years to come.
Love that. I want to give a special shout out to our mutual friend, Leslie Rossman, for setting up this chat with us for today. Leslie, I appreciate you. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents and Conversations Live. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.